It was just after 1:30 in the morning when I was driving along a back road outside of El Paso, Texas. The kind of road where there are no streetlights, no traffic, and not even cell reception in most stretches. I'd been driving for close to 2 hours straight after a late dinner with my cousin, heading back toward Van Horn. I took this road a few times a year, Highway 62, I think. But at night, it felt like I was in a different country. The road was cracked and dry, surrounded by nothing but scrubland and distant mountains. It was one of those stretches where you started to question if you'd already passed the same cactus twice. My high beams cut through the dark in front of me, reflecting off a few distant road signs, and, occasionally, the glass eyes of a deer frozen at the edge of the asphalt. That's when I saw her. At first, it was just a flicker of white on the right shoulder. I thought maybe it was a plastic bag caught on a bush, but then it moved. I slowed down, squinting through the windshield. It was a woman. She was standing just a few feet from the edge of the road, facing the direction of oncoming traffic, one arm raised, slowly waving, the kind of wave that says help more than hello. She wore a long white dress. It looked dated, like something you'd see in an old photograph. She didn't move as my headlights approached, just stood there, barefoot, her arms still raised. I eased my foot off the gas. My first instinct was that she was in trouble. Maybe her car had broken down. Maybe she was injured. But then my headlights fully hit her, and I froze. She had no eyes. Her face was pale, drained of any warmth. Her hair was matted and hung down past her shoulders, clinging to her cheeks, and where her eyes should have been, there was just smooth, sunken skin, like it had grown over empty sockets. Her mouth was closed. Her expression was blank, but her arm kept moving. That slow, mechanical wave. I didn't even think. I slammed the gas and flew past her, my tires skidding slightly as I jerked the wheel back onto the center of the road. My heart was pounding. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I didn't want to see her watching me. 10 minutes passed. I was shaking, barely keeping the car straight. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a mask. Maybe I was seeing things. I turned the radio on, anything to kill the silence. Then I saw her again. This time she was standing in the middle of the road. Same white dress, same long black hair, same empty face. She didn't wave this time. She didn't move. She just stood there, arms by her sides, as if waiting. I jerked the wheel, swerving into the shoulder and nearly hitting a reflector post. My tires tore through gravel, and I fought to keep from hitting the ditch. When I looked back in the mirror, she was gone. No footsteps, no wind, no sound. I pulled over for a second, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping me tethered to reality. My hands were sweating. I was breathing too fast. I didn't want to drive forward, but I didn't want to go back either. I finally made it to Van Horn just before 3 a.m. I pulled into a 24-hour gas station and parked under the lights for a while. I didn't go inside. I just sat there. Eventually, I got out and started pumping gas. The clerk came outside for a smoke. He was maybe in his 60s, big hat, weathered face. After a minute of silence, I asked, "Hey, have you ever heard of anything weird out on 62? He looked at me for a second, then flicked the ash off his cigarette and said, "You saw her, didn't you?" I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. He nodded slowly. "You ain't the first. We call her La Mujer del Camino, the woman of the road. Been around for decades, people say. Story goes, she was hit by a truck back in the 50s, never made it home. Some say she still tries to flag down rides. Others say she's looking for the driver who killed her." He took another drag and said, "Few truckers won't drive that road anymore." One of them said she walked through his rig. Others say she screams sometimes, but only when you stop for her. I didn't say much after that. I just paid, nodded, and drove to my motel. That was almost 10 years ago. I still avoid that stretch of road at night. But, last month, I was scrolling through a regional Facebook group for West Texas stories, and someone posted about a woman in white they saw off Highway 62. They said she was waving at them, and when they slowed down, she had no eyes. The top comment: she's still waiting for someone to take her home. It was late, a little after 1 a.m., and I was just getting off my shift at a small diner outside of Columbus. I was 18 at the time, had just gotten my license a few months earlier, and was driving my mom's old Honda Civic while she worked the overnight nurse rotation. I usually closed on weekends, and it always gave me this strange feeling driving home at night. Not quite fear, but like the world felt a little different after midnight. Emptier, quieter, like the rules were slightly off. That night, I stayed an extra hour helping clean up after a grease trap overflowed in the kitchen. By the time I walked out, the parking lot was dark except for one busted fluorescent light flickering above the back door. I got into the car, locked the doors, and turned on the heater. The lot was empty. I remember clearly, because I always checked. That's why it stuck out when, about 5 minutes into the drive, I noticed a pair of headlights behind me. I was heading down a back road shortcut to get home. 2 lanes, no lights, and lined by nothing but trees and occasional mailboxes. The kind of road where no one's out unless they live there, or they're lost. At first I didn't think much of the car behind me, but then I noticed something weird. The headlights weren't on. I could still see the car in my rearview mirror. A black sedan, maybe an older model, but its headlights were completely off. The only reason I could see it at all was because of my own rear lights reflecting off the front grille. I slowed down a little, hoping they'd pass me. They didn't. I made a turn off the main road. They turned too. At this point, I was starting to feel that tight knot in my stomach. I wasn't far from home, maybe 5 more minutes, but I didn't want this car following me all the way back. So I did something kind of dumb. I turned again, off into a looping subdivision road that would eventually take me back to the main road. A little detour. If they were really following me, they'd either have to turn too, or keep going straight. They turned. Still no headlights. Still the same distance. Always just barely visible. At this point, I knew something was wrong. I took another turn, then another. I even pulled into a random driveway, paused for a second, and backed out like I was heading somewhere else. The car didn't stop. It just slowly crept forward, like it was keeping a buffer, never close enough to see the driver, never far enough to ignore. I punched the gas, took another road I knew would loop past the elementary school and take me back to my street. My heart was hammering. I was checking the rearview mirror constantly. It was still there. I pulled into my driveway without thinking. The porch light was off. My dad always turned it off by midnight, and the whole house was dark. I sprinted inside and locked the door behind me. My dad was still up, watching TV in the back room. I told him what happened, that someone had been following me, that they didn't have their lights on, that they pulled into the driveway behind me. We both went to the window together and looked out. There was nothing there. No car, no sound, no headlights in the distance. Just the dark street. But what was even weirder, there weren't even tire marks in the driveway. No sign that anyone had pulled in. We pulled up the security camera on my dad's phone. He has one of those Ring-style setups with a front porch cam that captures the whole driveway. We scrolled to the time I pulled in. There was a skip. Right at the moment when the car should have pulled in behind me, the footage jumped forward 2 minutes. No glitchy frame, no buffering, just gone. When the footage resumed, the driveway was empty. There was no other explanation. We watched it 5 times, and the rest of the night, the camera worked perfectly. It recorded every single motion, even a raccoon digging around our trash can around 3 a.m. But those 2 minutes, gone. I didn't sleep much that night, neither did my dad. He ended up calling a friend from the police department to file an informal report. They took it seriously, but with no license plate, no clear make or model, and no footage, there wasn't much they could do. The cop that came by said the whole lights-off thing has been used before people follow someone to learn their route home. Sometimes it's harmless, sometimes it's not. I said no, because I hadn't. I never saw anyone inside, not once, even when they were right behind me. I've moved since then. I live in a bigger city now, a few hours away, but I'll never forget that drive home. Or the look on my dad's face when he saw that footage skip like someone had hit pause on reality. To this day, we've never figured out what happened. But sometimes, late at night, I'll still get this feeling. Like I'm being followed. Like someone out there still knows where I live, and they're just waiting for me to turn the wrong corner. This happened back in 2003. I was 29 at the time, and my girlfriend Sarah and I were driving from Birmingham down to Mobile for a weekend trip. We were planning to camp in a state park and spend the rest of the time visiting her sister. It was about 11:40 at night when we got off the highway and started cutting through a more rural route, one of those long stretches of 2-lane roads surrounded by nothing but pine trees and darkness. The GPS said this route would shave off 20 minutes. Looking back, I'd gladly trade those 20 minutes now. We were maybe 15 miles outside a small town called Greenville when it happened. At first, we heard it before we saw anything. A sound, faint, distant, like a baby crying. Sarah, do you hear that? It was coming from somewhere up ahead. We rounded a bend, and that's when we saw it. Right in the middle of the road, a small bundle, unmoving, just sitting there in the middle of the asphalt, maybe 20 or 30 feet ahead. We couldn't see it clearly at first, but as we got closer, I realized what we were looking at. It was a baby, or at least, it looked like one. Wrapped in a thin white blanket sitting upright in the middle of the road. No car seat, no adult, no signs of an accident, just a baby crying in the dark. I hit the brakes and swerved slightly to avoid it. The car came to a stop maybe 10 feet away. Sarah gasped and immediately opened her door, but I grabbed her arm. Wait, something's not right. The baby kept crying. The sound echoed strangely off the trees, like it was looping. There was no house nearby, no vehicle, nothing but forest. I cautiously stepped out of the car, heart racing, and slowly walked toward it. My headlights lit the road, casting long shadows behind every tree. But as I got closer, something about the crying changed. It didn't seem natural. It was too even, too perfectly looped. And then I saw it. The baby wasn't a baby at all. It was a speaker wrapped in cloth, a small battery pack taped underneath, and a tiny red blinking light beside the power switch. The crying was pre-recorded. That's when I heard movement. Sarah yelled. I turned back toward the car just in time to see her slam her door shut, pointing to the trees. Figures, at least 3 or 4 of them, moving between the trunks, low and fast. I ran back to the driver's side, threw it into drive, and punched the gas. The rear tires skidded slightly on the gravel shoulder before we lurched forward, flying past the speaker and deeper down the road. I checked the mirror. Shadows darted across the edge of the tree line. One of them stepped out just far enough for the light to catch them. A hooded figure, no face visible, just standing there, watching. We didn't stop again until we hit the outskirts of Greenville and found a small gas station that was thankfully still open. The clerk looked at us like we'd just survived a tornado. We told him what we saw. He didn't look surprised. Clerk said, "That's the 3rd one this year." Turns out there'd been a string of late-night robberies in that region over the past 2 years. all using the same method. Someone placed a crying baby sound effect in the road to lure drivers out of their cars. Then others hiding in the woods would ambush them, steal their wallets, their cars, sometimes worse. At least 2 people had gone missing that way. One of them was later found in a drainage ditch, tied up and barely alive. We gave a statement to the police that night. They searched the stretch of road we'd been on, but never found the speaker or any of the people we saw, like they'd just melted into the forest. Sarah didn't sleep at all that weekend. Neither did I. We cut the trip short and went straight back to Birmingham. For months after, I couldn't drive on back roads at night without gripping the wheel tighter than normal. I started noticing every shape in the trees, every sound that didn't quite belong. Even now, over 20 years later, I still think about it sometimes. How easy it is to fall for something that tugs at your instincts. How something meant to signal danger or desperation can be used against you. So if you ever see a baby in the road in the middle of the night, lock your doors, trust your gut, and whatever you do, don't get out. This happened to my Uncle Paul back in 1997. He doesn't talk about it much, but he told me the full story a couple of years ago when I stayed with him during a storm that knocked out power. No phones, no internet, just candlelight and rain tapping against the windows. He told it slowly, carefully, like he was afraid saying too much might bring it back. Paul used to drive long haul for a freight company. He'd been through every state in the country except Alaska. By the late 90s, he was based out of New Jersey and usually drove East Coast routes, Philly, Albany, sometimes into Boston. That night, he was coming back from a drop-off in upstate New York. It was snowing lightly, and he was driving through central Jersey, Route 31, I think, around 11 p.m. He'd always had a soft spot for hitchhikers. Said it was something about growing up in the 70s, when it was more common, and people trusted each other a little more. So when he saw a man on the side of the road walking through the snow with his thumb out, Paul pulled over. The guy looked average. Jeans, boots, a green army surplus jacket with the collar turned up, hood over his head carrying nothing, no bag or backpack. He opened the passenger door and slid in without a word. Paul nodded and said, "Where are you headed?" The man didn't answer, just looked straight out the windshield, breathing quietly. For 20 minutes, they drove in silence. Paul figured the guy was just cold and grateful for the ride. He didn't press it, but he said the atmosphere inside the cab was heavy. Not tense exactly, just unnatural. Like the air was thicker than it should be, like the silence was too loud. Then, out of nowhere, the man spoke. "You should check on your mother tomorrow. Her blood pressure's high." Paul almost swerved. He turned to look at the guy, but he was still staring out the window, deadpan. Paul's mom, my grandma, had been in the hospital the week before. She was recovering from a mild stroke, and they'd just brought her home. Her blood pressure had been up and down ever since. But Paul hadn't mentioned any of that. Not to this guy. Not to anyone at work. He'd barely said anything since the guy got in. "How do you know that?" The man didn't respond, so Paul pulled over, hard, and said, "I asked you a question." That's when the man turned to him. Not quickly, just slow and steady, like he already knew exactly what he was going to say, and he smiled. "You shouldn't pick up strangers." Then he opened the door and stepped out, while the truck was still rolling. Paul hit the brakes and jumped out. The snow was falling harder now, but the headlights lit up the road ahead clearly. The man was gone. No footprints in the snow. No shadow moving down the side of the road. Just falling snow and the hum of the truck's engine. He searched the tree line with a flashlight for 15 minutes. Nothing. No voice. No trail. Just cold. The next morning, Paul called my grandmother. She hadn't answered the phone all night. When he finally got through, a neighbor picked up. She'd collapsed in the kitchen that morning. Blood pressure spike, barely conscious. If he hadn't called when he did, the neighbor never would have gone over. Her doctor later said she might have died if she'd gone much longer without help. To this day, Paul doesn't know who that man was. He gave the police a report, just in case someone else had picked him up or seen him. They never found anyone matching the description. No one reported missing. He never picked up another hitchhiker after that. And he keeps a photo of my grandma in the glove compartment of every car he owns. He told me this. Sometimes I wonder if it was a warning, or something else. Something watching me, using my trust to say what it needed to say, then disappearing before I asked too much. He still drives late at night sometimes, but he says if he ever sees someone on the side of the road again, walking in the snow, he's not stopping. Not anymore.